Welcome to Pickleball Therapy. I'm your host, Tony Roig. This is the supplemental video to episode 142 of the podcast. In this video, I'm going to be explaining to you about stress, imparting stress or stress addition, and I'm illustrating it on the board over here, as well as some stress resistance concepts on the court board. If you want to listen to the entire podcast and go in depth, check out the podcast on this channel. The full podcast is here, or you can listen to it on any podcast platform. All right. We're talking about adding stress. What does it mean to add stress to your opponents? And we're going to go over some examples here. If you remember from last time, episode 140, we dove into, I was going to say dived, but I say dove, I think is better. We dove into the stress resistance side, and we explained that you think of yourself as a pickleball player. You think of yourself as there's two sides. I like to put the paddle on there, maybe a smile. There's two sides to you as a player. One is how well can you resist stress, right? So can you resist stress? And the other one is, can you impart stress? Now, it's important to remember as we work through this, that this is the more important side. You really need to be able to resist stress. You want to be able to impart stress as well, that's good. But resisting stress is absolutely critical to your game. Think of it as foundationally. You want to have this first. This is what makes you the wall out there. This is what makes you so hard to beat. Most of the times, most of the games that we're playing, just this alone will lead you to victory in most rallies, because your opponents are unable to themselves resist stress. So 2, 3, 4 shots in, they're cooked, they're done, they're missing. You're not, because you can resist stress. Imparting stress is where you're able to add some additional elements to your game to impart some stress to your opponents. Some of them are pretty simple, and I'm going to give you a couple examples on here that you can start using right now. Some of them are a little more involved, roll volleys, flicks, things like that, a little more involved way of imparting stress. But when you think of yourself as a player, right, when you're thinking about yourself as a player, understanding that there's these two aspects to your game, right? There's the ability to resist stress and the ability to impart stress, will help you identify the areas of the game that you need to focus on. Again, start here, but find those areas in your game that you're making mistakes, right? Where are you making mistakes? What kind of mistakes are you making? Okay? Sometimes you hear the term unforced error. I'm okay with the term unforced error, the concept of it. The number itself is not very helpful, because if you end up with, say 8 unforced errors at the end of a game, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I don't know how to help you there. Now, if you say, I hit 3 dinks into the net or 2 returns of serve wide, now we got something to work on. Now we can dive deeper and try and solve that problem. All of those potentially being unforced errors, right? But you need a little more detail when you talk about unforced error. But so you start on this side and you start identifying those holes in your game, those leaks, right, where water is running through your game, right, where you're basically leaking water in your game, leaking points, if you will, in your game. You fix those first. Then you can look at imparting more stress to your opponents, because that'll make you the most well-rounded player. Let's go over here and give you an easy example of the idea of imparting stress. I'm focusing on this now. So I'm going to focus on imparting stress and give you some techniques here on how you can impart stress. So you have a serve, right? So I'm going to focus, you're going to be this player. Let me lay out the board. I got ahead of myself there a second. So this is the serve team down here. And this is the return team up here, hence the yellow R's. And what we're going to do is we are going to play out a pickleball point, and we're going to be focusing on you as the returner on the court, and what can you do to be successful there? So, or to impart more stress, I should say. So you have the serve's been hit. Now, you can return serve here. Okay, so you can hit a returner serve here, allowing the serve team to come here and then hit their shot from there, their third shot from there. Whether they catch in transition, or even if you're all the way up here because you hit a moon ball and landed here, the stress on your opponents here is not that great, right? This is not imparting a lot of stress on your opponents. So on this side of your game, maybe you can do a little better. What if, let's do the same thing, let's play the pickleball point again. So we got our serve, but this time your return is here, okay? Now, look at it from the vantage point of your opponent, trying to hit this third shot. This is a much more stressful situation for this player than something that looks like this at the time they're hitting their third shot, right? This one, you would say, low stress on this player. Remember, we're focusing on you being this player. So stress on this player, good thing. So if you're this player, in this situation, you're under stress, they don't have stress, not very good for you. In this situation, in this return of serve, right? Now you've created a situation where they have to hit from here, your partner's there. You've increased the stress on your opponents. Every time you increase the stress on your opponents, what's going to happen? You're increasing the likelihood that they're going to make a mistake or miss their shot or not put pressure on you, both of which are good for you, right? So here's how you can think about adding stress to your game to up the way you're playing, to improve the way you're playing. And if you want to think about them all together, let's just keep using the return of serve. And I'm going to show you dinking in 1 second because that's a really helpful area to do both of these as well. But let's say that there's a serve and you hit it long, okay? Well, what that says is you're not able to resist the stress of the serve being applied to you. Or, listen to 140 so you get the full story, but you're not able to resist the stress of having to hit the shot because that's stressful as well. Or you're hitting the shots into the net and things like that. That's not being able to resist the stress yourself and making the mistake. So once you have that ironed out, that's when you start looking at, if I return here, am I imparting stress on my opponents? What if I return here? Now, you notice I didn't go here, okay? Now, in theory, if I go, well, actually here, right? This would be the most stress. These would be some of the most stressful shots, or here, right? So I don't go there. Why? Because I still have to keep this in mind. And if I hit it here, I failed on this one, okay? So that's why we always use a margin error, and that's something we use inside the pickleball system all the time, this concept of margin of error. And balancing out this and this is super important way of playing pickleball. That's why we don't target these kind of, really extreme returns of serve. Returning here is going to apply plenty of stress to them, to your opponents, without making it an error by you on resisting stress. Let's look at it now in terms of dinking. So let's bring everybody up to the MBZ line, and let's look at stress resistance and stress imparting, or adding stress to your opponents up at the non-volley zone line when you're dinking. So you're still going to be this player. That will make it simple. So you're this player. So we're going to be focusing on, so this is you here, okay? So you get a dink here, okay? And now you need to decide what type of dink to hit. Let's assume the dink hit to you is pretty neutral, meaning like it's in a place that you can do something with it. It doesn't have a lot of stuff going on with it. So you can choose what to do here. Now, you could hit it wide, net, long, hard and long, or out here, something like that. You could make a mistake. That's an example of where you're not able to resist the stress of that particular shot. If that's the case, remember, focus here first. Make sure that you're not making the mistake. There's a statistic that is an amazing statistic. I mean, it's almost inconceivable to think about this, where Colin Johns, who actually plays on this side, played in 5 consecutive gold medal pro matches. Okay, these are the best players in the world playing for the gold medal, right? In 5 consecutive matches, right, which was 19 games, Colin did not hit one dink into the net. Not one. What does that tell you? He can resist a lot of stress. So can his partner Ben, his brother Ben. But I'm focusing on Colin. He can resist a ton of stress. Now his brother Ben is actually better at imparting stress. He's a very good imparter of stress. Colin can impart stress as well. So no slight to Colin on his imparting stress. But that's how you look at the game in terms of Colin on resisting stress. Poof, very difficult to break Colin down. And if you want to hear Colin's presentation on how he views the game and tip that you can use in your game, make sure you join us for the summit, 2023 summit, Pickleball Summit. But anyway, so going back to the dink. So the first question is, can you resist the stress? Net, wide, things like that. Or popping it up too. If you pop it up, right, that's the other one. Pop it up, then you're not able to resist the stress of the dink. Okay, let's assume you already got that down. You're good to go. Great. Now the question is, what type of dink are you going to hit? Are you going to hit a dink that's just going to kind of bop over the net like this here? Now remember, this is a dink you can do something with. You're not on defense here. Are you just going to bop it over or bop it over here? Not very stressful. What if you learn to dink this dink here? Or here? Or even here, right? What if you start thinking about, or throwing up an MVZ lob, woo, over the top of the head like this, landing it there or something like that, right? What about, or landing it here? What about, looking at different shots that you can use to impart stress when you're in a given situation? And the beautiful thing about this approach is that you can take it piece by piece. So you don't have to think of yourself as like, I need to have everything. You need to look at the situations that you're commonly in, like dinks. If you're playing in a type of game that has some dinking, what can you do there? If you're playing against bangers, right? Can I resist the stress of the bang, right? And then what can I do to impart stress to my opponents? Nice block volley, boom, ball's here. Now they have to get to it, and they get to it, I let it go. Probably a good strategy. So think about your game in terms of resisting stress first, and then imparting stress within what you normally play in, and you're going to be able to vastly improve as a pickleball player. If you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You're going to get a lot more content just like this. And if you're ready to keep growing, I'm going to put a link here to another podcast. Check it out. And I'll put a link in here to something else that you can check out. It might help you improve your game. Be well.